Hello, everyone. Welcome to another linguistic class by the teacher Vladimir. Today, we are going to talk about those social variation in language and our day by day. Uh, so, we are going to study some linguistic aspect taken from a book, the origin of the language, and we are going to compare with that movie characteristics. So, let's starting. So we are going to study like the way the social variation can compare with the real life. So the movie calls My Fair Lady. In language not only communicate information, but also reflect a social structure and the relationship between a speaker. Every time we speak, we several aspects of social identify. For example, age, gender, education level, occupation, origin, economic status, or ethnic group. When we speak, we show like all those things are. Language therefore varies according to the social factors, and there is not a single correct way to speak, but rather many legitimate ways depending on the context and the social groups. It's so important, one aspect important. And to reflect the aspect reading the assigned topic, there is a movie that visually represents this element, which will be described along with a different event in the film. Well, the movie called My Fair Ladies, as you can see in the image, tell the story of Elisa Dudley, a young working class London flower girl with a thick Cornish accent, popular variety from London. Her pronunciation and grammar immediately identify her as a lower class person. Henry Higgins, a professor specializing in phonetic, bet he can teach her to speak correctly and transform her into an upper class lady simple by changing her speech with the accent of British upper class. As I told you before, language sometimes depending and the area or we are. When Elisa speaks in public, people mock her accent or look down on her, demonstrating that the way one speaks at as a social barrier. And this is the first comparison between the chapter of the book, the original of the language, with the movie, since the language reflects the social class. Very important. Language can identify like the way or the class you are. Language reflects the social standing. Elisa's way of speaking immediately marks her as a lower class, just like a social dialect described in the chapter. On the other hand, the linguistic prestige which represent over prestige, speaking the standard variety, comfort, status, and power. In the field, Higgins seeks to impose over prestige. He teaches Lisa standard pronunciation so she can be accepted by the high society. Elisa must pronounce the word correctly to gain respect and social acceptance. So the episode also illustrates the concept of covert prestige, which suggests that colloquial language also holds value within one's original group. This means that as that one speaker can use a colloquial forms to fit in with their community, even if they know how to speak in standard Spanish. In the field, Elisa, despite learning to speak elegantly, loses the subtitle prestige she once held among her people. When she speaks like a lady, she ceases to belong to her original world. And the chapter mentioned that language it is a tool of social inclusion and exclusion, and changing the way one speaks can mean giving up a part of one identify. One speaker can modify their way of the speaking depending on the situation, and this is known as style sheeting. They can go from a formal register to an informal one or vice versa. This is not a change of the language, but a change in the formality or the social variation. And that is the precisely what Elisa does in the movie. She changed her way to speak depending on the place and the people she is with. So language is not neutral, meaning that is always express, identify, and power. That is, language constructs a social identify. That is so important. That what language can do in a social language can do in the people. So, and does not just reflect it. This idea is show us in the film when Elisa mastered aristocratic speech, the other treat her as if she were a different person. On the other hand, different speech don't reflect errors but rather social and cultural diversity. However, social societies value or intelligence with a standard speech. In the movie, this is associated with Higgins, who is an expert in phonetics, and therefore he judges people by their accent. So the movie My Fair Lady is a perfect representation of social variation in language because it shows us how accent and pronunciation determine social status. That language can open or close a social opportunities. The adopting a standard variety can create a conflict with the personal identify. Well, in other words, Elisa moves from a low social dialect to a high prestige one, illustrating the relationship between language, class, and identity. Understanding linguistic variation helps to avoid prejudice and to appreciate the social richness of human language. So it was the comparison, the chapter of the book, the origin of the language, by the movie My First Lady, show us how can variation linguistic can affect uh, our social life, even though the we can have a different prestige into the social or depending with people we are. So it was everything. Thank you. Thanks for your attentions.